Welcome to the Metal Boys. Today on the show, oh yeah, Canadian metal band Exciter with Dan Beehler. Dan, what's going on?
Not much. How you doing, buddy?
A lot of people have been asking me, what's up with Exciter? Is there some new music coming out? Is there a new album? What's going on?
Actually, yeah, we just went into pre-production. It's taking a long time because we don't, like a lot of other bands, we don't work on it every day. And with the live shows, rehearsing for that, it's taken a while, but it's getting there, and we're pretty excited about it. We like the material, and as soon as we're done with the pre-production, we're going to go in and start recording it. So I'm sure at some point next year it'll be out.
So far, what kind of vibe are you getting? Does it sound like the first album? The second album, the third album?
Well, it's hard to say. We're really close to it, but. So far, I think it's a combination of the three.
The classics, we'll call them, right? That's
yeah, and I mean, it just feels so right to write it. I know the pressure is on us, all over the world to make sure that the album is as good or close to those first three, but we're the guys that wrote it, and coming back together all these years, it just feels natural to write it, and, hopefully everybody will like it when it does come out.
You're going for a 2019 release?
Things are moving along. Like I said, we're in pre-production right now, and there's only 10 songs on it, so we're doing it like the old school days, side heavy, side metal.
Yeah.
And so once we get the pre-production done, then we'll start recording. So I don't think it'll take that long once we start recording, so definitely next year.
What has been the fan reaction? I know it's been good, but some stories. The band is the classic lineup, or the original lineup, will say. What has been the fan reaction around the world? I know, like all over the internet, it's a big buzz.
Well, it's been crazy, and what freaks us out too is there's a lot of people in their early 20s, teens, 30s, people that weren't around back in the 80s, and they're all there, and they have Exciter tattoos and T-shirts, and they're huge fans, and of course the older people that saw us back in the day and stayed loyal, whatever, but right across the board, it's different now in the sense where people come up to us out of respect and say thank you for starting this, or thank you for being the pioneers, or none of this would be going on if it wasn't for you guys, and they come at us from a different angle, which is, really, really flattering, and we really, really appreciate it. But the fans have been great, and not only the fans, we just played 70,000 Tons of Metal, and, other festivals we're at, like bands like Creator and Destruction come up to us and go, we got into music because of you guys, and you were a huge influence on us, and we get a lot of that with the younger bands, and even the older bands, like I say, Creator and Destruction, and there's quite a few of them out there that we influence. So the fan reaction has been great. Really loyal fans, crazy shows, and a lot of energy, and we just got to transfer that onto another album like we did on the first three, and I think it'll be good.
Any members from the Big Four come to you and say, man, if it wasn't for you guys, you guys were such pioneers, or you influenced us, with this song or with this album?
No, not from the Big Four, I wouldn't say. I know I talked to Dave Mustaine years ago. He recognized, he goes, you guys are one of the pioneers. I'm sure they all know that and realize that, but nobody's in the Big Four has said that. But bands everywhere, all over the world, Phil Anselmo, Sebastian Bach, the list goes on, I guess. Just about everybody got our first album back then, and how crazy the thrash movement was when it was taking off.
What was it like for Canadians to try to break into heavy metal back in the day? I mean, I know what it is because I lived through it, but just for those youngins out there who don't understand.
Okay. Never mind just being Canadian, that's hard enough. Try being from Ottawa. Back then, you got an old black dial telephone and the mailing service, and that's about it. And unless you're from Vancouver or Montreal or Toronto back then, it was like you didn't have a chance in hell. So we were fighting the world. We were fighting just to get record companies to recognize us in Canada, and they wouldn't. And so we just went elsewhere and got signed elsewhere. But it was hard because, we'd go out on the road with some American bands, and we'd come home and they'd stay on the road. And a lot of times, because of the visas and getting over the border, we missed out on a lot of tours in the States where they would just grab somebody that was down there, like Anthrax or Exodus or whoever. And we missed out on a lot. And I think we suffered a lot being Canadian. And back then, we would go and play to thousands of people or tour with Motorhead or Venom or whatever, and come home. And Montreal was there for us from day one. So was Toronto, but we come home to our hometown and nobody really gave a shit. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. Luckily, the rest of the world recognized us before this country. But I always say, the reverse is there's a lot of Canadian bands that can't do shit outside the Canadian borders, and I would rather have it this way. But, that was back then, and things are different now. We have a huge Canadian following, and people have recognized what really went on back then as far as us being pioneers, and there's a respect factor, and things are different now. We can play just about anywhere in Canada now.
I mean, you had the Canadian factor back then, but you also had the singing drummer factor back then, because there weren't that many singing drummers, especially in speed thrash heavy metal, right? I mean,
yeah, well, even today, there's very few. I mean, there's always been singing drummers, but not ones that did it to the velocity that I did. And that didn't really hurt us, to tell you the truth. It was actually a little bit of an advantage. Not that I was the show or anything, but people would show up just to see if I could really do it.
That's right.
And then they go, holy shit, he can do it, So it was maybe one of the attractions because it was something different.
Yeah.
I'm sure not everybody liked it, but it was there, and I did it. I still do it now, but I don't think that hindered us in any sense.
How did you get on the, was it Metal, U.S. Metal Volume 2, right? It was U.S. Volume 2. Was that Johnny Z who did that? Who got you on?
No, that's Mike Varney from Shrapnel Records. He did U.S. Metal Volume 1 and Volume 2, which were actually American guitarists that were unsung, They would send their demos, and he would put these bands, mostly bands that nobody heard of, a song from them to showcase the guitarists. And John was asked, even though he was from Canada, so we had World War III recorded, and on U.S. Metal Volume 2, Mike Varney put out World War III. Now, a year after that, we did a demo, which was Heavy Metal Maniac, and we sent it, all over the place, all over Canada, and I still have some of the record company replies, sarcastic. You guys aren't going to go anywhere. Nobody here got too excited, blah, 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 blah. So Mike Varney heard the demo and said, fuck this, I'm releasing it. And we said, well, Mike, it's a demo. He goes, I don't care, man, I'm releasing it. It sounds wicked. And so he signed our first album.
Now, what was the reception originally I know today it's a classic, right, around the world, but back in the day, what was the fan reaction, or what were the sales like?
Oh my God! Well, our sound man, it was all cassettes back then in the underground tape trading market and shit. So our sound man, our sound man was the guy that recorded it for us and produced it, and we recorded the whole album on 8 tracks. But anyways, he sent cassettes out to Europe because it was a demo, right?
Yeah.
And the fans got a hold of it and copied it. And when Mike Varney signed us, he said there was an advance order of 10,000 units. People were going into record stores in Holland and Germany and Sweden going, is the Exciter album here yet? Because all they had was this shitty little demo, little cassette.
Yeah.
So the sales were crazy. As soon as it hit the stores, it sold. It was nuts all over the world, and the reception was great. Everybody loved the album, and I think it's still to this date probably our biggest album.
And then you have Violence and Force, right?
Yeah.
What were the changes? Were you building at that point, and people saying, "Wow, this band is really, they're progressing." I know that vocal-wise, you've been actually now more in the head voice. You're sort of like stretching your vocal range.
Yeah.
What was the fan reaction to the second album?
It was great. It was just as good as the first one, which surprised us because we wrote pretty much those two albums back to back, and finished off Violence and Force right after Heavy Metal Maniac was released in '83, and we recorded Violence and Force in '83. So we thought the album should have sounded like the first album, but Carl Kennedy produced it, and it ended up that the guitar didn't sound the same, and but fans ate it up. Nobody said anything about it, and it was, I think, almost as big as the first album. And you're right, I was 19 when I sang Heavy Metal Maniac, and I sang the whole thing in one take because it was a demo tape, and I did stretch my voice a little bit more on Violence and then a little bit more on Long Live the Loud as I progressed as a singer.
And of course, Long Live the Loud, this is more polished, the production's a lot stronger, the songs are strong as well. I guess the fans ate that one up as well, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. It was a big album. And you're right, we were progressing as songwriters. The production was bigger, and it was a very well received album, for sure. And it's a shame we didn't go on to make another one with John.
Yeah, I mean, what happened? Why did John leave the band at that point?
Oh, that's a very long story. We weren't getting along at the time, and that's a story for another time.
All right.
John left in 1985, and we brought in Brian McPhee.
Unveiling the Wicked. Was this like just the idea for the album cover? This was like V, right? The miniseries V? For those people out there who don't know, there was a miniseries called V where aliens invaded the Earth, but they looked human, but they really weren't human. They had some sort of plastic faces. And, yeah. It
ended up being like that. What happened was we recorded the album in England where a record company was, and V hadn't even been out yet in America.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and some just like the cover, but actually that's a model on the cover, and somebody from the art department at the record company came up with the idea, and they just peeled it off like a latex mask or whatever they did. And then when V came out, it's like, holy fuck, that's like the cover. So we really had nothing to do with that cover. It was presented to us, and we went, fuck yeah, we'll go with it.
At what point did everything start going sour? Where you started, you had brought in a vocalist, later albums, and then you left the band.
Yeah. Actually, I'm pretty proud of the Unveiling album. I think it was a great album.
I think so too. I like it.
The songs were great. We wrote that album in a week, and that's with a new guitarist, so I'm pretty proud of that too. And then we recorded it and went on to tour. But after that, Brian, I found, tried to take the band in even a lot more commercial direction. And it's funny, that Black album, or OTT it was called in Europe, where we brought in the vocalist, I actually sang the album first, and then he just came in and sang over what I did. And I have an old copy of that album with me singing the vocals, and I listened to it recently, and it sounds a little more like Unveiling with me singing it, and why we got a vocal. Everybody was pressuring us, you got to get a singer, you got to get a singer. Like 4 albums into it, what the fuck were we thinking? And like I said, I didn't like the material on the album, and there was turmoil within the band, and I just had enough. I just thought, if this is the way the directions of the band is going, actually, the guy that produced that album, Ed Stone, from the Metalworks in Toronto, who had a lot to do with Triumph Productions, I gave him a copy of Heavy Metal Maniac and told him to listen to it before we went to the studio.
Yeah.
When we got there, he said, if you think I'm going to make you sound like that piece of shit, you go to another fucking thing coming. So I'm just sitting there going, well, that little piece of fucking shit is the reason why we're sitting here spending $50,000 in your fucking studio. So it was a headbutting thing. Like, he had the whole Triumph commercial thing going on, which was right up Brian's alley, and everything just went south, and then the singer came in, and I just left after that.
And, okay, and then, I mean, you could talk about, then there was another version of Exciter, and then the band is finally back together after so many years. Do you think there should, like, the US has their big four. Do you think Annihilator, Exciter, Razor, and I'm trying to think of others, we should have our own big four as well?
Yeah. Voivod, yeah, for
Voivod,
sure.
there we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would that be your big four? Razor, Voivod, Annihilator, and Exciter?
Sacrifice, maybe, too.
Yeah. Yeah. And Anvil, right?
What about Anvil? Yeah. Yeah, there's a few of them in there, more than four.
Who are your influences? Was it Motorhead to be so, to the thrash element of your band, or the speed element?
Definitely the new wave of British heavy metal. Sabbath is in there for sure. They've always been in there. And Priest goes back a long way, but man, when Saxon and Iron Maiden and Motorhead and that whole wave just influenced the shit out of us.
All right.
But before that, we're into the Scorpions and old Priest and Sabbath and more American stuff, because that's all we had, like Aerosmith and the early days Kiss and Ted Nugent and anything on the heavier side. But once new wave of British heavy metal came in, that was it. We Exciter really, flourished as more of a British style than the American thrash bands.
So what was the trigger point where you guys said, okay, let's all get back together again?
You mean to get together with the reunion?
Yes.
Well, there was a bit of turmoil between John and the members of his band, that version of Exciter.
Yeah.
And something went down where they said John left the band and retired and put it on Blabbermouth, and he didn't retire, so that all exploded. And Al and I heard about this, and on Blabbermouth they had said that they were going to go on with the name. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. My brother thought of that name, and there's no original band member, and we were all confused, so I called up John and went from there. And I just said, listen, John, Al and I are sitting right here, and, if you want to do something, give me a call. So John says, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. It might take 6 months or a year to figure out what I'm going to do. And like within a week, he called us up, and we sat down, and that was it. And the first rehearsal was like, we took a week off. It had been 30 years.
So you got tour dates, I know, in California. You got a tour date in Montreal. I guess there's a lot of one-offs happening.
Yeah.
Do you have any other dates to announce?
Yeah, we're playing in Germany. I can't remember where in August, and we're also playing in Singapore in August. So there's a couple more of them coming up for sure. The LA one is going to be cool. And of course, in a couple of weeks, Montreal. And like I said earlier, Montreal is more like a hometown for us. They've always been there since day one. And even before we got to Europe, to see what it was like in the crazy days back then, we were like, well, Montreal's like this. And, when we came back to America, we could always count on Montreal to sell out at the Spectrum and go completely insane. So we always felt like Montreal was home to us.
And I know you guys are doing a signing as well during the day.
Yes.
33 tours. 33, yeah. So that's pretty cool. I think it's like at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Anyways, all the dates on your website. What's your URL?
It's Long Live the Loud. Facebook is Original Exciter.
Okay, that's where people can go check out the dates.
Yep.
Check out
Yep.
the times. Dan,
Yep.
I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate all your time. Is there anything you want to add?
Well, hopefully we'll see everybody out in Montreal in a couple of weeks, and like always, it's going to be insane, and we're really, really looking forward to it. And it's nice to play in Canada, believe it or not, for a change. It's a big thing for us. Looking forward to the LA show and all the other shows, and thank you so much to all the Exciter fans out there that stuck by us and still believe in us, and we'll see you out there in the mosh pit.